So the story is told about a gentleman who got a new job as the university professor. So he moves into the city, and they get him a beautiful home. And he comes with his family, and he moves into the home, and he comes inside, and it's a gorgeous, beautiful house. There's only one problem. As soon as he comes in, he starts moving his stuff in, he notices that there's no water in the house. Nothing here. He turns on the faucet, nothing works. Goes to the shower, nothing works. So he's new in town. He opens up the yellow pages, looks for a plumber, finds a plumber. The plumber comes over to the house. So what seems to be the problem? He said, there's no water in the house. He says, I'll fix that for you, no problem. Plumber goes around. A few minutes later, he comes back, said, Doc, all done. Perfect. He said, that's amazing. Goes over to the faucet, it works beautifully. He said, that's terrific. He says, tell me, what do I owe you? He says, $250. He says, $250? You should excuse me. He said, you were here about 6 minutes. $250? I'll tell you the truth. He said, I'm the president of the university. I don't make $250 in 6 minutes. And the plumber said, of course. He said, when I was the president of the university, I didn't make $250 in 6 minutes either. Takes time to sink in a little bit. Yeah. I'll wait. I should have told that joke on Shabbos, because these jokes don't work. There's the ones you use on Shabbos, the ones that don't work. Anyway. Anybody, is there a point to the joke? I was afraid someone would ask me that. The point of the joke is, of course, is quite obvious. I'll let you figure it out. You have to make decisions wisely, folks. People are in very lucrative positions, and they get great salaries, but sometimes they give up what's most important. In this case, the university professor became a plumber. Now, there's nothing wrong with plumbers, don't get me wrong, I want to be politically correct. But if you're suited well to be a university professor, even if you're not making what the plumber makes, that's what you should be doing. And all the decisions we make, and a lot of people make decisions about how to spend their time, and indeed spend valuable time. I know people in this audience, some of whom I've met today, many of whom I've met today, who spend really significant time and take serious financial loss because they're spending hours, many hours a week, just trying to be Makarev Acheinu B'nai Yisrael. It's really amazing. You talk about Mesiras Nefesh, you talk about really giving up your time, and for some people, giving up some very serious financial reward just for this tremendous mitzvah. You have to make your decisions wisely. How are you going to spend your time? Over this past Shabbos, I think we all agreed, at least for me walking around, that if you missed it, if you were not here Shabbos, you missed something very, very, very special. How many of you agree with that? You plan and you plan. It's like a bar mitzvah, you know. You plan, and then it really happens. It's unbelievable. And we had such siyata d'shmaya. Everybody, running from one place to another. It was just fantastic. Something extremely, extremely special. And of course, a big part of that special Shabbos that we had is the gentleman that you're about to hear from again, who I'm sitting next to. And I can't possibly say the same introduction again that I said today, although I could, if you really want me to, just say the exact same thing. But I want to tell you what it's like, at least for me, over the last years, just listening to Rabbi Krohn. There was a great attorney in the United States. Some of the older folks in the audience might remember the name Louis Nizer. Remember Louis Nizer? Of course. Louis Nizer was really one of the great litigators, one of the great... You walked into a courtroom and you saw Louis Nizer sitting at the bench, you were afraid. You knew that this guy was probably going to win the case. He knew that there was one moment during any trial that was the most crucial moment. And that was when his opponent, his adversary, the other attorney, the prosecuting attorney, whoever it may be, would get up and speak to the jury and sum up the entire case. Because at that time, that summation to the jury would be extremely powerful. Now, how's he going to do anything in order to prevent this adversary from making his points to the jury? And Louis Nizer figured it out. And here's what he did. At that time, smoking was permitted in all buildings, even in courtrooms. You could smoke. Wherever you went, people smoked. He smoked a cigar, Louis Nizer. And listen to this genius. What he decided to do is he took his cigar whenever he went into an important case, and whoever was that last day before the summation of the trial, and he took a very thin wire and he placed it right down the center of the cigar, and it was protruding past the end of the cigar several inches. Then he started smoking, and the ashes started to come out at the end of the cigar, but they just wouldn't fall. The ashes don't go anywhere. So while the attorney's up there talking to the jury's just watching that cigar. And they're wondering, when are the ashes? They're not listening to him. They just, well, how's that happening? Genius, genius. That's what it's like for me listening to Rabbi Krohn. You simply cannot get distracted. You just can't. No matter what else is going on in the room, I find anyway, I am transfixed. And it was such an honor to have him here today and speak several times. And whenever we ask him to speak another session, more and more and more. So we asked him tonight again, of course, Ma'aseh Shabbos, to again be Mahana the Olam. So please, it's a great covet to introduce our wonderful friend and leader, Rabbi Krohn.
That was close, but no cigar. It's a special schus to have spent this great, great Shabbos here. I cannot thank enough Rabbi Matt Trapp, my dear friend Rabbi Yaakov Solomon, and Rabbi Chaim Samson for inviting me to come to spend this great, great Shabbos, this first convention of Inspire that Mitzvah Hashem will become an annual event. There's a very interesting Gemara in Psachim, Kuf Yud Gimel Amud Aleph. And the Gemara tells us, Shloisha minoichle ha'olam haba. There are three that are guaranteed to have olam haba. And the Gemara mentions two of them, and the third one is Hamavdil al hayayin b'motzoi Shabbos, the one who makes havdalah on wine on Motzei Shabbos. And the Gemara says, Mahi, what do you mean? Why is that? And the Gemara explains that in the time of the Gemara, there were many people that did not have enough wine. Today, wine is obviously available to everyone. But wine was a rare commodity in the time of Chazal. And if somebody would make Kiddush on Friday night, and everybody likes to drink wine, so a person would finish all the wine Friday night for Kiddush, and then he wouldn't have to make wine for Havdalah. But the Gemara says that somebody that can control themselves, because we know that when you make a bracha on wine, it's very chashiv. And the Meshayer Mikedusha le'avdalta, he leaves over from Kiddush to Havdalah. He's able to control himself, and then he's able to make that bracha on wine, Motzei Shabbos. Such a person is Zoicha to Olam Haba. Listen to the expression, and I think that there's a very deep meaning to this Gemara. The Meshayer Mekedusha li'avdalta. He left over from the Kiddush to Havdalah. I think that describes our role for the rest of our lives. We have to take from the Kiddush, from the Heiligkeit of this Shabbos, the Meshayer Mekedusha, we have to take and leave over from the Kiddush, from the holiness, from the inspiration of Shabbos, la'avdalta, to the days of the week for the rest of our lives. We came to an unusual convention. The scope of the convention was to inspire not only ourselves, but to make sure that we inspire others. On this Shabbos, we've come, the Meshayar Mekedusha Lavdalta, to bring from that holiness, to bring sanctity to the secular days of the week. I want to share with you a beautiful story. A story that was told to me first by a girl in a Gateshead seminary. I was in Gateshead in England, and a girl comes over to me, and the story seemed so unusual and so remarkable that of course I had to hear it from the person himself to whom it happened. And she told me that it happened to her father. Her father, before he became frum, was known as Sam Zeitlin. Sam Zeitlin was a phenomenal cyclist. He would win one bicycle race after the other. As a matter of fact, in 1966, he won what was known as the New York State Sprint Championship. And Sam Zeitlin told me that there was tremendous jealousy on that team, that New York team, because people couldn't stand that he was Jewish. And one day he told me he was riding in Queens on Casino Boulevard, near Casino Park, where they had a track. And as he was driving home, he was on his bike and he was riding home, all of a sudden a car zoomed up behind him and he thought that the car would run him over. He ran onto the sidewalk with his bike behind a tree. So if the car would crash, it would crash into the tree, and the car skidded to a stop. And two guys yelled out, "You dirty Jew, we won't let you be the winner of any other races." They were two of his teammates. They couldn't stand him. He told me that the anti-Semitism was so bad that in 1967 there was what was known as the Grand Prix in Northbrook, Illinois, a cycling race. And he told me he was ahead by 3 seconds. He knew for sure he was going to win the race. Anybody who followed the Olympics knows that 1/10 of a second can win a race in glory for someone. He was 3 seconds ahead of everyone. As he came to the finish line, he lifted his hands in victory, and he was disqualified. They implied a rule, they imposed a rule that they never imposed before or afterwards. The rule in cycling is that as you go over the finish line, at least one hand has to be on the handlebar, because otherwise you're jeopardizing the spectators that are around there. So therefore, being that both his hands were off the bike, so therefore he was disqualified. And then he decided that's the end. It's obvious that they hate Jews in the cycling world. He's going to go someplace. Canada was too cold. Mexico was too high. He decided, I'll go to Israel. The Maccabeans had a team, and he decided he's going to join the Maccabean team. He won a championship in Eretz Yisrael, and then it came time to practice for the Olympics. While he was in Eretz Yisrael, of course he's a Jewish boy, he's not religious. He goes to the Kaisel one night, and he's trying to daven whatever he knows. He had very minimal background, but there were two brothers who saw him, David Goldberg and Chaim Goldberg. David Goldberg today is a Rosh Hashiva and tells his father-in-law, Rabbi Isaac Osband, who should have a refuah shlema. And David Goldberg and Chaim Goldberg started talking to this fellow, and they saw that he had an interest in Yiddishkeit, and they sent him to a fellow, Gershon Weinberger. And Gershon Weinberger, who was into Kiruv before anybody else was into Kiruv, he saw this is a Keli, this is somebody who's really interested, and so he invited him for Shabbos, and the boy, Sam Zeitlin, became Shimon Pesach Zeitlin, and he started becoming frum, and you would not believe it. Long before Eish HaTorah started, Rab Noach Weinberg started a yeshiva. The yeshiva was not called Eish HaTorah in those days, it was called Mogen Avram. Sam Zeitlin was the 5th Talmud of Rab Noach Weinberg. Of course, now he's in the yeshiva and he has to try out for the team that's going to put a cycling team into the Olympics. And the tryouts are on Shabbos. So he goes to Rab Noach Weinberg and he says, what should I do? I want to try out for the Olympics. And Rab Noach said, you should try out for the Olympics. It would be a tremendous Kiddush Hashem that a yeshiva man in Mogen Avram, which eventually became Eish HaTorah, would be known all over the world as the greatest cyclist of all. And Sam Zeitlin told me himself that when he used to pedal to that song that Gershon Weinberger taught him, Shabbos Hayoim Lashem. I don't know exactly how the song goes, but that song was the cadence to which he would cycle. But then he said to Rab Noach, but the tryouts are on Shabbos. He said, go to the coach, tell him, how can he do this in Israel on Shabbos? And he went to the coach, and the coach said, we are not a bunch of rabbis, we're a bunch of cyclists. And if you don't like it, you'll be off the team. He said, this is Israel. How could you do this in Israel? He said, go and Geholfen. What happened was that they had the tryouts on Shabbos. Of course, he wouldn't go. And that year, Israel could not send a cycling team to the Munich Olympics in 1972. In 1972, by your reaction, I see that you know as well as I do that 2 Israeli athletes were killed right away. The Palestinians kidnapped another 9. And it will be debated till the end of time whether the Germans should have gotten into a gunfight with them. But those 9 other hostages were killed on the spot even before the gunfight developed. And Shimon Pesach Zeitlin heard in Eretz Yisrael over the news that the Israeli athletes were killed. And he realized that what saved him was Shabbos. Ki eshmera Shabbos, keil yishmereni. What saved him was not only Shabbos, but his guiding light that was Rab Noach Weinberg, who became his mashpia. And this 5th Talmud of Rab Noach was saved because of the great Rebbe. Do you know that Rab Noach Weinberg was a descendant of the Slonim Rebbeim? And the Slonim Rebbe once said something that is so phenomenal. He said it for Rab Aaron Kalina. All of us should underline it in our Siddurim. When you daven Ma'ariv, underline it tomorrow night and remember that as the theme of Rab Noach's life, of the life of Inspire, and what Eishat Torah is all about, and what Kiruv is all about. Listen how Rab Aaron Kalina types this. Avas Olam Beis Yisrael Amcha Ohovta. We have said it thousands of times. Listen how the Rab Aaron Kalina typed it. Avas Olam Beis Yisrael. If people in Yidden, among Yidden, they love the world, they love materialism, they love secularism, they're not frum yet. Avas Olam, sie sind reingesunken in the Welt. Avas Olam Beis Yisrael. The Eibishter still loves them. Amcha, it's my nation, Ahovta, I love you. That's what we have to remember. Avas Olam, even though our brothers and sisters out there on the campuses, our third cousins, our co-workers, they're steeped in the Olam HaGashmi, it's still Amcha. It's Klal Yisrael. It's Hashem's nation. Amcha Hafta. We have to love them. We have to pity them. We have to go out and we have to reach them. And if that's the case, I want to share with you another great story that happened a number of years ago. Many of you are surely familiar with one of the tzaddikim in our generation, Rab Mordechai Neustadt, who started Vad Lahatzolas Nidchei Yisrael. And he had many people go to Russia, and they would try to learn in the private homes and in the private basements before Russia was freed from communism. And the greatest Rebbe for all those people was Rabbi Leo Esses, but eventually Rabbi Leo Esses, in the spring of '89, he went to Eretz Yisrael. So now Rabbi Neustadt had to have teachers from America because Rabbi Leo Esses left. So he would get different people. One of the people he got was a fellow from Monsey. His name is Rabbi Chiel Michal Chill. And Rabbi Chill told me that he came into Russia and he went into the basements and they bought talis and tefillin for people and siddurim. And he would go from house to house wherever they could do it in hiding. And he said there was one brilliant guy there, Moshe. Moshe would follow Rabbi Chill wherever he went. And he was brilliant. He was a scientist. Every shir, he was there. And finally, when Rabbi Chill had to leave, he said to him, Moshe, I don't know if I'll ever see you again, but just promise me this. If you come to America, promise me that you'll call me, and I'll do anything I can. And 6 months later, Rabbi Chill gets a call from Moshe. He says, where are you? He says, I'm up in Ithaca. I'm in the university in Ithaca, upstate in New York. And I got a visa, and I'm able to be there, but I don't have any svarim, I don't have anything. He said, it's no problem. I live in Monsey, I will get my friend, in 4 hours we'll be up there. I'll bring you everything. So he went to Tuvya's, and of course he bought out svarim, he bought a Russian siddur, he brought him all food, he bought him food for a month. And he comes up, it was in June, and he comes up there to Cornell University, and he brings him all the stuff. And Moshe can't believe it. He's so happy because he felt so alone in this country. And they're singing and dancing together, and he makes him feel so special. The next day, or that night rather, Rabbi Chill comes back to Muncie. He came back 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. He was exhausted. It's a 4-hour trip each way. And he taught embroiders in Washington Heights. So he was exhausted, but he's a Rebbe in the 11th grade. So he comes in and he says, boys, I want to tell you something. I'm exhausted. Go easy on me today. But I want to tell you something, what I did. And he told me, Rabbi Chill said to me, you know what he told them? Because he wanted that one day they should remember they should do something like this. He told them the whole story of Moshe, how he met him in Russia, and he went up and he brought him all the stuff. And the kids were duly impressed and they were very well behaved. The next year, a year later, a young fellow, Jeremy Strauss, who was in the 11th grade that year, the 12th grade next year, he comes running on a Sunday morning into Rabbi Chill's class. He says, Rebbe, you won't believe it. He says, what happened? He says, Friday night, my parents, we live in Englewood. We come to a shul. There's a guy there. He's obviously looking a Baal Tshuva, a fellow, an American boy. And my father says to him, you need a place to eat? He says, yeah. So he invites this fellow. He's sitting at our table. And my father says to him, there's always a story when a Baal Tshuva becomes frum. He says, how did you become frum? What happened? He says, you wouldn't believe it. I was graduating. I was in Cornell University. And I had a roommate. Some guy comes in at the end of June. His name was Moshe, a Russian guy. He makes a call. And 4 hours later, 2 guys come and they bring him food and they're singing and they're dancing with him. They bring him books. I never saw anything like this. And I said to Moshe, who are these guys? He said, they're my Jewish friends. He said, I'm Jewish. That's how Jews behave? I never realized that. And he decided, because of that act of chesed that Rabbi Chill and Rabbi Goodman did, that he has to look into his religion. And that was the beginning of his becoming frum. And you know what he said to Jeremy Strauss? Moshe was my roommate for 2 nights. Imagine that. After the second night, Moshe was transferred to a different part of the college. You know what we learned from this? We learned that you just have to plant the seed. One act of chesed by Rabbi Chill and Rabbi Goodman coming up there to Moshe, not only inspired Moshe, who lives in Lakewood, I won't let me say his last name today, but this other fellow who became frum. Why? Because of that one act of chesed. So I brought a present for every single one of you tonight, because I want to share with you one of the greatest expressions I ever heard in my life. There's a woman in Manchester, her name is Chavi Wakshal. She wrote a book, Facing Adversity with Faith. She never has MS. And what happened was, I went to see her and she told me she wrote this book. And in this book was this expression. There are people here tonight who will give it out. I didn't want anybody to have it until we spoke about it. But after my talk, every one of you will get one. Listen to this expression. We should live with this. Anyone can count the seeds in one apple. You don't have to be a big chacham to open an apple and count the seeds. But only Hashem can count the apples in one seed. Imagine how brilliant that is. Anyone can count the seeds in one apple, but only Hashem can count the apples in one seed. That one seed of chesed, it made that other fellow frum. Now he has children. Eventually he'll have grandchildren. That's what we came here for this Shabbos. We came to become those who will plant seeds. And what I added to this expression is plant seeds so that others will reap. That's what this Shabbos is all about, to plant seeds. Take this, that will be given out both in the men and women's section. Put it on your refrigerator. Remember, every act of kiruv, even one seed, can bring an apple grove of chesed, of spirituality, of life, of fulfillment to everyone that we get to know. And so I just want to end with this great story. If you haven't guessed it by now, my closest friend, besides my wife, is Yaakov Solomon. Everybody knows that. I adore him. I think he's the most talented fellow I know. You want your cigar now with the ashes? And he's just a total inspiration. And he's my psychologist, and he doesn't charge. So, of course, I can only reach him 1 o'clock in the morning, but that's what happens. I want to tell you a great story about Yaakov Solomon, and with that we'll close. Listen to this. Yaakov, as some of you know, gives the Discovery Program seminars all over the country. A number of years ago, he was in Minneapolis, and he started the session, let's say on a Thursday night or a Friday afternoon, and there were many, many people. And the way it works in the seminar is that everybody the first day introduces themselves. So this one introduces themselves and everybody. And finally there was one fellow sitting off on the side, and Yaakov asks him, "And who are you, sir?" Now all they had to do was say who he was, just say his name, but that's not what he said. He said, "My name is Michael and I'm an atheist." In other words, like right in your face, I'm not interested in what you have to say. So Yaakov is not anybody to shirk responsibility. He says, "Michael, if you don't have an open mind, what made you come to the seminar?" Michael says, "Well, I have a good friend who's sitting right next to me, and he said he thought I would find it interesting." Okay. Now, throughout a seminar, many, many different topics are discussed. And this Michael was brilliant. So, of course, anything that was brought up, that there's a Hashem in this world, other people would ask questions, but Michael challenged Yaakov. And Yaakov would answer, and Michael would answer, and people stood around, this awe, as if this verbal boxing match, everybody is in awe, back and forth. Michael's words, Yaakov's words, back and forth, everybody's listening to this fencing. This goes on a whole week. Finally, on Motzei Shabbos, or on Sunday afternoon, when everybody is about to leave, what Yaakov does is he says to every person in the audience, and let's say there are 50, 60 people, he says, "I need each and every one of you just to define the Shabbos in one word." Think about it for a moment. Define the Shabbos in one word. And so it was interesting. One guy got up and said, "I would say that one word, what to me this Shabbos was, informed." He became informed. Okay. Another person said, exhilarated. He was exhilarated by everything that he saw. Another person said, perplexed. This was brand new for everyone. So he left perplexed. It's interesting what the fourth guy said. The fourth guy said, inspired. That's interesting. Everybody said something, except Michael. Yaakov turns to Michael, and he says, "Michael, everybody defined the Shabbos. What about you? What do you say?" Michael was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "God bless you." Rabbi Krohn, God bless you. Reb Chaim, God bless you. My dear Yaakov, God bless you. And all of you who came for this fabulous Shabbos, God bless you. May the Eibishter bench every single one of you. For me, thank you. You sound like my mother. May every one of you be gebenched, beruchnius ubagashmius, because you made the effort to come to this Shabbos, to become a planter of seeds, so that apples of ruchnius and Yiddishkeit should grow all over the world. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for listening.